My beloved child. Listen to me very carefully, because what I am about to reveal is not something you hear twice in a lifetime. The person you trust the most. The person whose presence makes you feel calm. The person you defend even when your inner voice whispers doubt. That person is not what they appear to be. And the reason you are watching this right now is because somewhere deep inside you, something already felt off. You noticed small changes that you ignored. You felt moments of discomfort that you explained away. You sensed silence where warmth should have been. This is not coincidence. This is not overthinking. This is the beginning of awareness. And once awareness begins, there is no turning back. Stay with me, because every word from this moment onward connects directly to why you are no longer safe with that person anymore. There is a hidden pattern you have not been taught to recognize. It starts quietly. It never announces itself. It does not arrive with chaos or noise. It arrives with familiarity, comfort, routine. That person did not suddenly change. They revealed themselves slowly, layer by layer, in ways that kept you emotionally attached while your boundaries were gently pushed aside. They listened just enough to gain your trust. They supported you just enough to make you dependent. They questioned you just enough to weaken your confidence. And every time you felt uneasy, they offered a reason that sounded logical. A reason that sounded caring. A reason that made you doubt yourself instead of them. This is how safety disappears without you realizing it is gone. Here is the truth that most people discover too late. The most dangerous distance between two people is not physical. It is emotional confusion. When someone makes you feel grateful for basic respect. When someone makes you feel guilty for expressing discomfort. When someone slowly trains you to explain their behavior to yourself. That is when power silently shifts. That is when your instincts are muted. That is when your inner warning system starts failing. And that is exactly where you are standing right now. At the edge of realization. At the moment where everything finally begins to make sense. Do not look away. Because the clarity you are about to receive will change how you see every interaction you have had with them. What you thought was protection was control wrapped in concern. What you thought was guidance was direction designed for their benefit. What you thought was closeness was access. And access, once granted, is rarely returned voluntarily. That person learned your fears before they learned your strengths. They learned your emotional patterns before they showed their own. They know when you hesitate. They know when you give in. They know how long it takes for you to forgive. And that knowledge gives them an advantage you never agreed to give. This is why you feel drained after certain conversations. This is why your energy shifts around them. This is why peace seems to leave the room when they enter it. These are not random feelings. These are signals. Now comes the part most people resist. Because it demands courage. Safety is not always about physical distance. Sometimes it is about emotional clarity. Sometimes it is about recognizing when someone's presence costs you your peace. When being around them requires you to shrink. To stay silent. To overthink every word. To doubt your own reality. That is not connection. That is compromise of self. And no relationship that requires you to abandon yourself can ever be safe. You are not imagining this. You are not being dramatic. You are waking up. And once you see the pattern, you will never be able to unsee it. Stay right here. Because the next part will reveal the exact moment when their intentions stopped aligning with your well-being. Look at this moment as a quiet turning point. Everything you believed until now begins to rearrange itself here. You are not losing someone. You are regaining yourself. And that difference matters more than you realize. Because the person we are talking about never needed to hurt you openly. They only needed you to stay unsure. They only needed you to question your own reactions. The moment you started asking yourself whether you were the problem, the balance shifted. That was not accidental. That was learned behavior on their part. And the reason it feels so confusing is because it was designed to feel that way. Confusion keeps people close. Clarity sets them free. You must understand one powerful truth. Safe people do not make you feel small for having feelings. Safe people do not subtly compete with your growth. Safe people do not react differently when others are watching versus when you are alone. Think carefully about that. Notice how their tone changes depending on the audience. Notice how support turns into silence when it no longer benefits them. Notice how your achievements are acknowledged quickly and forgotten faster. These are not flaws. These are indicators. Indicators that your presence in their life serves a purpose that has nothing to do with your well-being. And once that purpose is fulfilled, the warmth fades. That is not connection. That is positioning. There is a moment many people miss. A moment when the mask slips, just for a second. It happens during disagreement. Or during your vulnerability. Or when you need them without offering anything in return. That is when you see impatience. That is when understanding disappears. That is when your pain feels inconvenient to them. You probably noticed it but dismissed it. You told yourself they were tired. Busy. Under pressure. But patterns do not lie. Consistency reveals intention. And their consistency has been quietly telling you that your needs come second. Sometimes last. Sometimes not at all. Here is something that will feel uncomfortable but necessary. You are not safe with someone who benefits from your silence. You are not safe with someone who grows calmer as you grow uncertain. You are not safe with someone who needs you to stay the same so they can stay ahead. The reason walking away feels heavy is because you have been carrying emotional weight that was never yours to hold. You have been doing emotional labor without recognition. You have been explaining behavior that never should have required explanation. That exhaustion you feel is not from loving too much. It is from being in a space where love is uneven. Now listen closely, because this part matters deeply. Real safety feels boring to people who are used to emotional intensity. Real safety feels steady. Predictable. Calm. And if chaos has been normalized in your connection with this person, peace will feel unfamiliar. Even wrong. That does not mean peace is dangerous. It means you were trained to associate unpredictability with importance. And breaking that association is the hardest step, but also the most freeing one. You are not meant to stay where you must constantly prove your worth. You are meant to be where your presence is enough. Stay with me, because the next part will uncover why your intuition started speaking louder only recently, and why ignoring it now would cost you far more than listening ever will. There comes a second when your body understands what your mind has been trying to deny. That second is not dramatic. It is quiet. It shows up as tension in your chest, as hesitation before replying, as relief when distance appears unexpectedly. These reactions are not weakness. They are intelligence. Your inner system has been collecting data far longer than your thoughts have been willing to process it. And now the signal is clear. Something about this person no longer feels safe. Not because of one moment, but because of many moments stitched together over time. Moments where your comfort was negotiable. Moments where your clarity was questioned. Moments where your reality was gently rewritten. Pay attention to how often you explain yourself to them. How often you rehearse conversations before they happen. How often you leave interactions feeling confused instead of understood. Safe connections do not require constant mental preparation. You do not need armor around people who respect you. The reason your guard stays up around this person is because your nervous system learned that unpredictability lives there. One day warmth. One day distance. One day understanding. One day dismissal. This inconsistency keeps you emotionally alert, always adjusting, always accommodating. And while you adapt, they remain unchanged. That imbalance is not accidental. It benefits the one who needs control without responsibility. Here is the realization that shifts everything. You were not chosen for who you are becoming. You were chosen for who you were willing to be for them. That version of you was quieter, more forgiving, more patient, less demanding. And the moment you started growing beyond that version, friction appeared. Questions turned into criticism. Support turned into subtle resistance. Encouragement turned into comparison. This is why your growth feels lonely around them. Not because you are alone, but because you are outgrowing the space they prepared for you. And spaces that cannot expand become suffocating. Notice how they react when you set even the smallest boundary. Notice the disappointment disguised as concern. Notice the guilt wrapped in reason. Notice how your no is met with emotional distance. Boundaries reveal intentions faster than any conversation ever could. Someone who values you will adjust. Someone who uses you will push back. And every time you soften your boundary to keep the peace, you teach them that your comfort is flexible. Over time, flexibility becomes expectation. Expectation becomes entitlement. And entitlement erodes safety completely. This is the point where choice quietly enters the room. Not a loud choice. Not a dramatic one. A simple, internal decision to listen to yourself again. To trust what you feel without needing permission. To accept that walking away from emotional confusion is not loss. It is protection. You do not need proof that convinces anyone else. Your clarity is enough. And as you move forward, remember this. The moment you start feeling lighter without someone, that absence is information. Do not ignore it. Because the next part will reveal why distancing yourself feels both frightening and freeing at the same time, and why that paradox is the strongest sign that you are finally choosing safety. There is a strange calm that appears right before truth fully settles in. It is not happiness. It is not sadness. It is clarity without noise. And that is where you are now. You may not have named it yet, but your heart already has. This calm exists because deep down you know you are no longer pretending. You are no longer forcing understanding where it does not exist. You are no longer shrinking to maintain balance. And the reason this feels unfamiliar is because you have spent a long time adjusting yourself to fit someone else's emotional weather. Now that adjustment is stopping. And what remains is you. Think about how often you felt responsible for their moods. How quickly you tried to fix tension. How naturally you absorbed discomfort just to keep things smooth. That did not happen because you are weak. It happened because you care. But care without reciprocity slowly becomes self-abandonment. And that is the part nobody warns you about. When care turns into a habit of self-erasure, safety quietly disappears. The person you are dealing with learned that you would bend before they would. That lesson was never spoken. It was observed. And once learned, it shaped every interaction that followed. Here is a realization that changes perspective completely. Distance did not create the problem. Distance revealed it. When you step back even slightly, notice how quickly the dynamic changes. Notice how silence becomes pressure. Notice how absence suddenly feels threatening to them. That reaction tells you everything. People who are secure do not panic when you take space. They respect it. People who rely on control feel it slipping and rush to regain it. This is why your independence feels like resistance to them. Not because you are doing something wrong, but because you are doing something new. You might be asking yourself why leaving feels heavy if staying feels wrong. The answer is attachment to potential. You stayed for who they could be. For moments that almost felt right. For promises that never fully arrived. Letting go means accepting reality as it is, not as it was hoped to be. And acceptance is harder than endurance. Endurance keeps hope alive. Acceptance closes the door. But doors close so that space can finally breathe. And breathing is something you have not done freely in a long time. Let this land gently. You are not walking away from love. You are walking toward alignment. Toward environments where you do not need to translate yourself. Toward connections where your nervous system can rest. The fear you feel is not a warning. It is the echo of a version of you that learned survival through adjustment. That version kept you safe once. But it is no longer needed. Stay here. Because the next part will expose the final illusion that kept you emotionally tied, and why releasing it will feel like reclaiming a part of yourself you thought was gone forever. There is one illusion that holds people longer than pain ever could. The belief that if you just try a little harder, things will finally change. This illusion feeds on patience. It survives on hope. It convinces you that understanding must be earned through endurance. But listen carefully. Change does not arrive where accountability is absent. Growth does not happen where comfort is protected at the cost of your peace. The person you are no longer safe with did not misunderstand you. They understood enough to know you would stay. And that knowledge became their security. Notice how often responsibility was redirected. When issues surfaced, explanations replaced reflection. When concerns were raised, intentions were emphasized instead of impact. You were asked to see their side while your own remained unexamined. Over time, this trained you to minimize your experience. To accept partial apologies. To settle for temporary adjustments instead of lasting change. This is not compromise. This is emotional delay. And delay is powerful because it keeps you waiting without moving forward. Here is the part that feels deeply personal. You were not valued for your boundaries. You were valued for your availability. Your willingness to listen. Your readiness to forgive. Your ability to stay calm when things felt unfair. These qualities are beautiful in the right environment. But in the wrong hands, they are used. And being used does not always feel harsh. Sometimes it feels familiar. Sometimes it feels like loyalty. Sometimes it feels like love. Until one day, you realize you have been carrying a connection alone. There is a reason clarity feels heavier before it feels freeing. It requires you to stop negotiating with reality. It asks you to accept that someone can care in their own way and still not be safe for you. This does not make you cold. It makes you honest. Honesty is the foundation of real safety. Without it, everything becomes performance. You perform understanding. You perform patience. You perform strength. And performing for connection is exhausting because it never ends. Let this truth settle slowly. You do not need closure from someone who avoided responsibility. You do not need validation from someone who benefited from your doubt. Your awareness is the closure. Your decision to choose yourself is the validation. The moment you stop explaining your need for distance is the moment you reclaim your power. Stay right here. Because the next part will reveal what happens after you stop chasing understanding, and how life begins to realign the moment you choose safety over familiarity. There is a shift that happens the moment you stop chasing explanations. It is subtle but irreversible. Your energy returns to you. Your thoughts slow down. Your breathing deepens. You realize how loud the noise was before, and how much effort it took just to stay balanced. This shift is not emptiness. It is space. Space where your mind is no longer running simulations of conversations that may never happen. Space where your heart is no longer waiting for reassurance that should have been freely given. And in this space, you begin to see how much of yourself you were giving away without noticing. Pay attention to what changes when you step back. Not in them, but in you. You smile without forcing it. You rest without guilt. You make decisions without checking how they will react. These small freedoms are not small at all. They are signals of safety returning. The absence of constant emotional monitoring is relief your body remembers instantly. This is how you know you were carrying more than your share. Because when the weight is lifted, even slightly, your system responds with calm instead of fear. You may notice something unexpected next. They may sense the distance. Not because you announced it, but because your energy is no longer feeding the dynamic. When that happens, responses often change. Messages become carefully timed. Words become softer. Promises sound clearer. This is not proof of transformation. It is a response to loss of access. Real change is quiet and consistent, not sudden and persuasive. And this is where many people get pulled back, mistaking reaction for reflection. Do not confuse effort to regain comfort with commitment to growth. Understand this deeply. You are not cruel for choosing yourself. You are not abandoning anyone. You are responding to information your experience provided. Safety does not require justification. It requires alignment. And alignment feels peaceful even when it is firm. The strength you are building now is not loud. It does not argue. It does not convince. It simply moves differently. And that difference changes everything. As you continue forward, remember this moment. The moment you stopped running toward clarity and allowed clarity to meet you. This is where your life begins to reorganize around truth instead of tolerance. The next part will reveal what becomes possible once you fully accept that not everyone who walks with you is meant to walk beside you forever, and why releasing that expectation is the final step into real emotional safety. There is a quiet strength that settles in when you finally accept this truth. Some people enter your life to reveal what you deserve, not to provide it. This understanding does not arrive with bitterness. It arrives with peace. You stop asking why they could not meet you where you stood. You stop replaying moments, searching for different outcomes. You see the connection clearly, without decoration, without excuses. And clarity like this does not shout. It stands firm. It tells you that what ended was not your fault, but it is your responsibility to protect what comes next. Notice how your standards begin to rise naturally. Not because you are demanding more, but because you are no longer settling for less. You become aware of how safety feels in your body. Calm conversations. Consistent behavior. Respect without reminders. These things no longer feel optional. They feel essential. And anyone who cannot offer them will feel out of place, not because you are superior, but because you are aligned. Alignment changes who can stay without conflict. It filters without force. There will be moments when memory tries to pull you back. Not to the truth, but to familiar comfort. That is normal. Familiarity can feel like safety even when it is not. But now you know the difference. You know how it feels to doubt yourself in someone's presence. You know how it feels to carry emotional weight that is not yours. And you also know how it feels to breathe freely again. That contrast is your guide. Trust it. It will never mislead you. What you are building now is invisible but powerful. Self-trust. Once restored, it becomes your strongest boundary. You no longer need to analyze every interaction. You sense alignment quickly. You respond instead of react. You choose environments that nourish rather than drain. This is not detachment. This is discernment. And discernment is what keeps you safe long after lessons are learned. Hold this final thought gently. You were never meant to be strong enough to endure what hurt you. You were meant to be wise enough to walk away from it. And the fact that you are here, listening, understanding, choosing differently, means you already are. The chapter with that person served its purpose. It taught you where safety ends and self-respect begins. And from this moment forward, you will never cross that line again. There is a deep silence that follows true understanding. Not the awkward kind. The settled kind. The kind where nothing needs to be proven anymore. This is where you stand now. You are no longer searching for signs. You are no longer waiting for permission to feel what you feel. The danger you escaped was never dramatic. It was subtle erosion. And the safety you are stepping into is not loud either. It is stable. It is clear. It is real. This is the moment where you stop surviving emotionally and start living deliberately. Look closely at how your inner dialogue has changed. You no longer ask, "Was I wrong to feel this way?" You now ask, "Why did I ignore myself for so long?" That shift is powerful. Because once you stop questioning your right to feel safe, no one can convince you to accept less. You have crossed a line internally that cannot be uncrossed. Awareness has replaced confusion. Discernment has replaced doubt. And this transformation did not require confrontation. It required honesty with yourself. You may realize something else now. The connection did not end suddenly. It ended the moment you stopped betraying yourself to keep it alive. And that is why there is no anger left, only understanding. Anger needs injustice to stay present. Understanding dissolves it. You see clearly now that what you called effort was endurance. What you called loyalty was tolerance. And what you called love was hope waiting for proof. This clarity does not harden you. It frees you. From this point forward, your life will respond differently to you. People who value balance will find you. Conversations will feel lighter. Decisions will feel simpler. Not because life becomes easy, but because you are no longer negotiating with your intuition. Safety will no longer be something you chase. It will be something you recognize instantly. And anything that threatens it will feel obvious, not confusing. Remember this as you move ahead. You did not lose someone. You lost an illusion that required you to disappear slowly. And in return, you gained yourself back completely. That is not an ending. That is a return. A return to clarity. A return to self-respect. A return to a life where being at peace is not a reward, but a requirement. And from here on, you will never mistake familiarity for safety again.